This video is actually a love letter to my uterus. Uterus, I love you. Hello, my beautiful friends. How are you doing today? My name is Sienna Noel. I like to talk about spirituality, a little bit of herbs, and life. And today, we are getting into a little bit more of a personal topic, and we are talking about my experience with an IUD. Yay! For those of you who do not know, IUD stands for intrauterine device, and it is a form of birth control. It is actually one of the most effective forms of birth control on the market today, besides abstinence, of course, but you know. IUDs are usually made up of some form of plastic or silicone, I believe, and they are little T-shaped devices that are inserted directly into the uterus, and they are either wrapped in copper or they release synthetic hormone. At the end of the little T of an IUD, there are little strings that are attached, and these strings hang out of the little opening of your cervix so that when you do want to get it removed, your doctor can essentially and hopefully just find the strings and pull it right out. So I had the Paragard IUD, which is the copper IUD or non-hormonal IUD. I got it inserted back in 2018 when I was 19 years old. And at the time, it just seemed like the best option in terms of non-hormonal birth control for me. I had tried the method of tracking my cycle by tracking my temperature in the morning, and that wasn't really working for me when I was younger because there was something funky going on with my hormones, and basically my temperature read that I was always ovulating, which clearly wasn't true. So I opted for the copper IUD. I was super excited because I was like, oh, this is great. It's a birth control. I don't really have to think about it after it's inserted. I don't have to worry about any hormones or any of the weird changes that come with that. And it's one of the most effective forms of birth control on the market. What do I have to worry about? Little did I know. Now look, if you decide that you want to get an IUD and you decide that that is the best option for you, by all means, go for it. Do whatever you feel is best for you. That's what I did when I first got it. So I had my IUD in for 6 years, and honestly, for a good portion of time, I really loved it. It was really convenient for me because, like I said, I didn't have to think about it. I really didn't have to worry about any sort of pregnancy scares or anything. Of course, STDs and STIs are a different story. Use a condom, kids. But yeah, there was definitely a period of time where I was very grateful for all of the services that the IUD had provided for me. So here's where things start to get a little less than ideal. First of all, and my gynecologist told me this, and I think this is something that a lot of gynecologists tell their patients, but usually they don't recommend the copper IUD for women who haven't yet had a child because it is a little bit bigger than the hormonal IUDs. So it can be a little bit more uncomfortable for a uterus that is still not baby size. I didn't care. I obviously wanted the non-hormonal choice, so that's what I went for. Let's talk about the insertion. The first time I got my IUD inserted, it actually rejected itself. Right after I got it inserted, I had my period, and the flow was so heavy, I think in part because my body was trying to push this foreign object out. But you're supposed to check for the strings that come out of your cervix to make sure that they're still there first month or so of having your IUD. And after that period, I felt the little plastic end of the IUD sticking out of my cervix. So I had to go get that one taken out and another one reinserted. Now, ladies, I'm not gonna lie to you. The insertion of an IUD is really not comfortable. I have and always have had a relatively higher pain tolerance. So for me, it felt kind of just like a pinch in the area where your cervix is, already not great, and some pretty intense cramping immediately after, and even for the 2 days after insertion. It all depends on your pain tolerance. Don't psych yourself out if you're wanting to get one, but just do your research and, again, feel out what's right for you. Let's get into side effects. So for me, the biggest side effect was a change in my periods. Yes, I did not have a hormonal IUD, but I did experience changes in my hormones and how my cycle functioned. So before I got my IUD inserted, my periods were really only about 3 to 4 days long, and I didn't have too many PMS or period-like symptoms. I didn't really get cramps. I didn't really get too mood swingy. I didn't really get any headaches or too bad of bloating or anything like that. If anything, it was just a little bit of occasional hormonal acne during that time and some fatigue, but nothing too major. After I got the IUD inserted, my periods jumped from 4 days to 8 days. That's twice the amount of blood. And for pretty much the first year to year and a half, they were consistently about 7 days of bleeding. After that, for the last 4.5 to 5 years that I've had it, my periods went down to about 5 or 6 days, but still definitely a big difference from before. It also changed the symptoms of my period. The biggest one was cramping. I experienced cramps from this IUD worse than I had ever really experienced before, because I didn't even really cramp before. But there were definitely times where I would be working and on my period and cramping so bad that I had to go over into a corner and just kind of cuddle myself a little bit. Let's just put it that way. I would consistently get cramps just before my period and in the beginning of my period. They also made my breasts swell and kind of hurt and be sore, which was never something I had experienced with either. And even my mood changed. The week just before my period also got a lot more intense. I was a lot more irritable, a lot more quick to get frustrated. It just kind of seemed to up those unfortunate symptoms that we experienced during the luteal phase anyway. Even though I didn't have a hormonal IUD, I think just the fact that I had a foreign object in my uterus that was releasing little bits of copper throughout my body definitely affected and changed the way that my body functioned. Another unfortunate side effect of having an IUD, and this is more so for male counterparts, during intimacy there were definitely times when my partner got poked with the strings, and that's no fun for him, you know what I mean? My friend asked this great question, asking how the side effects of the IUD affected my ability to basically tune in with my cycle on an emotional and spiritual side. And I will say just the way that it affected my cycle in general definitely affected my ability to tune in with it. I was still able to learn about my cycle and understand what was happening within my body a little bit more. And I think actually learning that helped me make the decision that I wanted to get my IUD removed. But because it changed my cycle, it definitely made getting in tune with it a little bit more difficult, because especially for the first year and a half, it was changing. I didn't always know what my cycle was going to look like every month. And I would say the effects that it had on my emotions, like heightening the emotions I had during my luteal phase, definitely made that more difficult. I also experienced a huge drop in libido in the last year or two of having my IUD. I think part of that was because of the sensitivity that it started to create during sex. I think it was just kind of messing with my natural functions. I mean, obviously it was. I've also just been connecting a lot more to the powers that I have as a woman, with the ability to reproduce, with the ability to create another human being in that space where the IUD was. So I got to a point where I kind of just felt like this foreign object was stifling the energy that naturally flows through that area, because that is the energy that creates life. That's the energy that pulls consciousness down from the ethers and turns it into a physical matter. So the removal was not nearly as painful or as uncomfortable as the insertion. So if you are thinking of getting it removed, girl, do not be afraid. It is so much easier than getting it put in, I promise. And it's so much faster. There are certain cases sometimes where the IUD will migrate and shift in different parts of your body, and your doctor can't find the strings just to pull it out, or I've heard also cases of women who a piece of it had broken off and they had to do an ultrasound and get a minor surgery. But again, same thing with insertion. Those are things that you don't want to overly stress about, and just kind of hope for the best when you go in. And if you do have a particular case, there are ways to solve it, and there are ways to get it out of your body. So go in expecting the best and prepared for the worst. You know, what else can you do? So I had my IUD removed actually only 2 days ago, and I will honestly say that I already feel a big difference in my body. My body can definitely tell that something is not in there anymore. I actually used to walk around and sometimes sit, and I would be able to actually feel it in my uterus. So I'm really glad that that's over. I did have a little bit of cramping for the first few hours after getting it removed. Not anything like the cramping when getting it inserted, or even like the cramping that I experienced during my periods. It was a much more light cramping. But honestly, that makes sense, because I mean, something was just taken out of my uterus. it must be confused, you know? If you want true sovereignty, true liberation within your body, the best thing that you can do is learn to track your cycle. Get to know your body. Become aware of the signs that your body shows you when you're in different parts of your cycle. Understand how your personal cycle functions, because we're all different. We all have different symptoms. We all have different ways of dealing with things. I do think that the copper IUD is a great option for women who don't want to have to worry about tracking and don't want to take anything with hormones. But I do think that you should be prepared for the fact that you are still going, most likely, to get side effects as you would with a hormonal IUD or any other form of hormonal birth control. When you alter your body in this way, when you inject things into your body, no matter what they are, it's going to shift how your body functions. Your body has to adapt to this new version of itself and create a new way of being in its natural cycle. Copper toxicity is also a thing. Copper poisoning is also a thing. If you have any questions that I didn't answer in this video about IUDs or just about our cycle, menstrual, feminine health in general, go ahead and leave those in the comments down below. If you like this video and you want to see more content like this, you can go ahead and click right here to subscribe, or you can click right here to watch last week's video. And with that, I will bid you adieu, my beautiful folks. Much love to you all.